political crisis in Gambia grows as President Yahya Jammeh refuses to step down. Doctors in Zimbabwe call for clean water to fight the latest typhoid outbreak. And the trials and triumphs of civil rights pioneers in the U.S. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. In less than 2 hours, the United Nations will vote on a resolution to fully support the effort of ECOWAS to respect the will of the people, as was expressed in the presidential election last December 1st. Gambia's president-elect Adama Barrow is said to be sworn in at the Gambian embassy in neighboring Senegal on Thursday. The ceremony could trigger military action by ECOWAS against longtime leader Yahya Jammeh, who was refusing to relinquish power. Now, the inauguration was initially set to take place Thursday in the Gambian capital, Banjul. Jammeh initially accepted the results of the December 1st presidential election, which he lost to Barrow, but he later changed his mind, citing alleged voting irregularities. Earlier this week, Jammeh declared a state of emergency in the West African nation. Gambia's West African neighbors are trying to help resolve the situation. Mauritania's President Ould Abdel Aziz held talks with Jammeh on Wednesday before heading to Senegal to meet with Barrow.
I cannot justify my absence in the Gambia in this difficult time. I have to be here to consult with my Gambian brothers. I have consultation with my brother President Jammeh, and I am now less pessimistic. We will work on a peaceful solution, which is in the interest of everyone, the Gambia and everyone.
Well, hundreds of tourists boarded special flights out of Gambia on Wednesday, and others crowded onto ferries to neighboring Senegal to escape the potential violence. But others remained behind at resort hotels. Gambian Army Chief Ousmane Bedje told a French news agency Wednesday that his men will not resist other African forces if they cross the border. Well, now for some insight into the situation in Gambia, Tamsir Jassy, founder of the Gambian Association for Peace and Reconciliation, joins me live via Skype from Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, Tamsir.
Thank you, Victor.
As we speak right now, preparations are underway for the inauguration of Mr. Barrow. Tell me, what do you make of this happening outside of the Gambia?
Well, right now, the important thing is that the Gambian people need to have their country back. And if this is the manner in which we're going to go about it, that's fine. What's important is that the Gambian people and the world begin to recognize Mr. Barrow as the legitimate president of the Republic of the Gambia. And as from that point on, I'm sure the international community knows exactly what to do in order to normalize the situation in Gambia.
Now, after a few hours of the inauguration, the UN is expected also to be voting on authorizing military action. First, do you expect that to happen? And if that authorization comes in, what would be the likely next move?
I have every confidence that the United Nations and the rest of the world will go ahead with whatever resolutions are needed to flush out Mr. Jammeh. When it comes to the Gambian military on the ground, I have been very close with them during the time that I work as the Deputy Inspector General of Police. I have an inside knowledge of exactly what's going on in there. I don't think it's a fighting force at any time, and it is absolutely not a match to the UN forces that will be coming in. So I think this should be quick and easy.
Do you see a danger of this kind of turning into what we witnessed in Ivory Coast during the Gbagbo and the now current president kind of squabble over power?
Of course, no one enters these operations knowing precisely what the outcome would be, regardless of how well one plans it. But I can assure you that the situation in Ivory Coast is very different from that of the Gambia. The Gambia, it's a very, very small military, and I can assure you the vast majority of the people are not in support of Mr. Jammeh, and will not in any way, shape, or form offer any resistance. As a matter of fact, I can assure you they would love to see Mr. Jammeh leave, because nothing is working within the military as it is. So this shouldn't be a problem.
Very quickly, we know that he has been offered asylum in Nigeria and elsewhere. He hasn't kind of accepted that. Do you fear that perhaps he has no other way out except perhaps fight his way to the death?
Well, Mr. Jammeh has shut every door, burnt down every bridge. That's the way he has been. And at this point in his life, he will get what comes to him because he deserves whatever it is that he gets. I don't think Mr. Jammeh is the type that will fight to death. I don't know him to be that sort of a brave. No, he will not.
All right. Tamsir, thank you very much for your insights. And we hope that there will be peace in the Gambia. We'll look back. We'll check with you again in the coming days.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Our Tamsir Jas is the founder of Gambia Association for Peace and Reconciliation. An Al-Qaeda-linked extremist group is claiming responsibility for Wednesday's suicide attack on a military camp in northern Mali that killed at least 60 soldiers and former rebels and wounded 115. A car packed with explosives penetrated the camp in Gao as hundreds of soldiers gathered for a morning meeting. Al-Marabitoun, which is linked to Al-Qaeda's North Africa branch, says it was behind the bombing. Malian Defense Minister Abdoulaye Idrissa Maiga says Wednesday's attack was part of a war with no name.
We are not used to this kind of violence. These are practices that are imported here to turn us away from the path of peace. And this is why I think the message we all carry, we should take it with dignity, raise awareness, and look ahead to a better future.
Well, the soldiers belong to the joint operation mechanism, which brings together government forces and former Tuareg rebels who formed patrols to enforce the 2015 Malian peace agreement. Tuareg separatists took advantage of a 2012 military coup in Mali to briefly seize control of the north before Al-Qaeda-linked militants drove them out. Later, a French force took back the region from the Islamists. Went out to East Africa, where Somalia is facing perhaps the second worst drought in decades. The Somali government is appealing an urgent life-saving aid for millions on the verge of starving to death. In a joint press conference with the country's National Drought Task Force on Thursday, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud said millions of his people will die in a looming humanitarian crisis if urgent action is not taken on time. The president has sent an urgent appeal to the Somalis and the international community to respond to the situation before it's too late. Mahmoud says the current worsening drought has left millions of people without food, water, or health care. The appeal comes a day after the United Nations warned that the country, already crippled by decades of war, terrorism, and piracy, risks slipping back into famine. More than any other, Barack Obama's presidency had a special significance to Africans. As he now prepares to vacate the White House, a new book examining the Obama years and Africa was recently launched in Washington. United States and Africa Relations, the Obama Presidency, is jointly published by AMIP News and the Africa Society. Here to talk about the book is Patricia Bain, President of the Africa Society, and Frederick Noma Addison, author and CEO AMIP News. I want to welcome both of you to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, up to this time, at this point, a lot has been said about Obama's legacy to Africa, but then we are now speaking the context of this book. Patricia, what is it that this book really brings out that will make somebody perhaps want to consider it to see what Obama meant to the continent?
Well, we know that there's going to be a lot of discussion in subsequent years about what Obama has really done because of his significance to Africa, the continent, and his personal ties, and the fact that his presidency was historic. And so we wanted to have an objective record of telling the public this is what he has done. So this is a compilation of what the Obama administration has done vis-a-vis Africa. They had tremendous work on providing opportunity and creating economic improvement and development for the scores of people on the continent. It's a great compilation. It's a great read. We encourage everybody to get one.
Now, Fred, you went through the book. You wrote this book. So how, in a way, how do you detach yourself from the emotion, from the sentiment of having this one as having been a son of Africa in so many respects, and just being realistic about how much it did, say, as compared to George W. Bush?
Well, thank you very much. We approached it as a journalistic material. We know that the book will be critiqued and discussed, and so with my own journalism background, that's how we approached it. And between AMIP News and Africa Society, I do remember we had several tensions as to what was objective, what was fair, what was accurate, what was realistic, what would be offensive. Now, the president's legacy and the book revolves around four main pillars of the administration's engagement and strategy towards engaging Africa, and that was sparing economic growth, democracy and good governance, peace and security, and opportunity and development. So what we basically did was to track every important initiative along these four lines. And I'm pleased to say that between 2009 and January 2017, where he's getting ready to bow out, a lot of significant accomplishments were chalked.
And I mentioned George W. Bush. Many have always wanted to kind of compare because they kind of expected much more from President Obama. Now, in this book, would you, in a way, kind of address that issue? Whether did he do much more? Did he build upon what President Bush had left? What is the assessment?
So the beauty of our book is it gives an objective assessment of what has been done. The president and his administration and his Africa agenda has achieved certain measurable things, which we have enumerated in the book. And then we leave enough of a margin for the reader to then judge and say, what does that mean? Because different things mean different, have impacted people differently. And so, you know, we all know that legacy is something that is a continuum. It will be judged as we go. But we think that this is a good, objective, on record of what he has done.
Mm-hmm. Now, Fred, is this more of a, a book that would be of interest and appeal to African audiences, or is it a book that anybody who is interested in how the U.S. engaged with Africa during the Obama years would like to read?
Now, the subject of international relations can be very heavy. And I will reference what the production manager of the press that made this book communicated to me. Now, they're in Pennsylvania. He's somebody who prints books for a living. And I once asked him, whilst the work was in progress, I asked him, what is your personal assessment? What does this book mean to you? And he used the word fascinating to describe it. That caught my attention. Now, this is not somebody who is involved in African affairs. He has very little connection or interest in his day-to-day life with the African continent, but somehow through the presentation, the creativity in the way it's presented, it made sense to him and he connected with it. And he said things like, there's information in it that I could have never imagined that happened in the past 8 years. So to answer your question, this is a book that appeals to anybody who has the slightest interest in international affairs and in African affairs.
For a person who is in Africa, who reads this book, do you think they can appreciate what they experienced, what they saw, with what somebody in the United States, like us who are here, perhaps saw and understood about the U.S. policy towards Africa during the Obama years?
I think so. See, with the Obama administration's Africa agenda, I think that they did what I call structural changes. They looked at the U.S.-Africa relations and try to strengthen those relationships by going about it more structurally. So I think when you read this book, you'll be able to see that while, there wasn't a lot of money thrown at problems as in the past, this administration had a good, thorough look at what would it take to be better partners with the African continent. And it's that kind of dynamic that I really appreciate.
Okay. In just a few seconds, Fred, what is it, do you think, is a major takeaway from this?
I would highlight on the president's vision and understanding of the power of partnerships. His key initiatives, whether it's Feed the Future, whether it's the Power Africa, all focused on partnerships, working with people, working with African leaders to make things happen.
Thanks a lot to both of you. Ms. Bain, Frederick.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, Patricia Bain is president of the African Society, and Frederick Noma Addison is the CEO AMIP News and author of the United States and Africa Relations, the Obama Presidency. Well, now, don't forget to watch our special 2-hour live coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States tomorrow, Friday. The show will start at 1600 UTC, and we'll take a closer look at the ceremony, talk to experts and our reporters at different parts across Washington, D.C. We'll bring to you the pulse of this major event. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out all headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up. Problem, typhoid. Stay with us.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with some news on the bird flu. Lino.
Well, Uganda recently announced that it has detected bird flu among migratory birds. The Agriculture Ministry says bird flu had been detected in 2 spots, one near Entebbe on the banks of Lake Victoria and another in the Masaka district, about 120 kilometers west of Kampala. The species so far hit by the highly pathogenic avian influenza are migratory white-winged black terns, as well as domestic ducks and chickens. The H5N8 strain of the virus has been spreading in poultry farms in some parts of Europe, including France and Germany. The government is urging people not to eat birds and other wild animals that are found dead. Meanwhile, Kenya and Rwanda have banned poultry imports from Uganda as a precautionary measure. In Zimbabwe, doctors and aid organizations are calling on the government to improve the country's water and sanitation amid a typhoid outbreak. Authorities have banned and started dismantling vendors' malls as part of efforts to contain the outbreak that has struck more than 200 people in Harare, killing 2. The disease has also been detected in other parts of Zimbabwe. Typhoid infections are caused by ingesting food or water contaminated by bacteria called Salmonella typhi, which is found in human waste. Symptoms include nausea, fever, and abdominal pain. The disease thrives in conditions where sanitation and hygiene are poor. Authorities in Harare say street vending poses a risk because it cannot be monitored for hygiene standards. Meanwhile, vendors say authorities must ensure that citizens have adequate clean water and sanitation.
We've done a ban on all food vending in the city because we realize people are selling food items from the pavements and from unsanitary conditions. So as a measure to try and control typhoid, we've banned food vending in Harare, temporarily though.
Typhoid is not being caused by people selling tomatoes or fruits on the street. Typhoid is being caused by council authorities who are failing to collect garbage on time and creating an unclean city.
Some medical analysts blame the typhoid outbreak on the frequent and prolonged droughts, including the dry spell linked to last year's El Niño weather phenomenon. Now, in today's Ask the Experts segment, we spoke with Dr. Ken Redcross, who is a board-certified internal medicine physician, and asked him, what are some of the first steps to managing a fever?
A fever is obviously a sign that something has been introduced into your body, whether that be a bacteria or a virus or some other organism that's coming in. So that's the warning sign. The good thing is the good Lord made a system in our brain that helps us with our temperature and the hypothalamus. That's a little part of our brain that helps us with that. But should that kind of break through, you need to make sure that the fever is not too high. When I say too high, 104 is a big one, but 102, 103, those are high fevers that lets us know, all right, we need to start kind of circling the wagons. How are we going to battle this? It's fluids. It's rest. I'm not big on medications, but there are some that are beneficial. Of course, Tylenol, ibuprofen, those are great. But once again, think about slowing down your core temperature as well with those washcloths. I brought yogurt here too because cooling substances are also very beneficial as well. When you're thinking of fever, it's a warning sign. Make sure that you jump on that, and I don't want the fever persisting over a couple of days. I want to make sure that things are getting better, because if it's over 3 days or so, there may be a sign that is not necessarily viral, and maybe then it's bacterial. So it's important to do that.
And that was internal medicine physician Dr. Ken Redcross speaking with us about some first steps to managing a fever. If you have a medical question that you would like to have answered, tweet me at Lenore Moudou and we'll have a medical expert respond to your query. That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, again, find me on Twitter. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much, Lenore. And I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the nation's capital's newest museum celebrates the history of civil rights. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. Western Africa is on the edge as Gambia's president refuses to acknowledge his mandate has expired, prompting neighbors to marshal their troops. The Nigerian Air Force sends jets and troops to Senegal amid the deepening political crisis in Gambia. In Kenya, dozens of medical students protest in Nairobi, urging the government to tackle the ongoing medical crisis in the country. Finally, in South Africa, fires continue to rage in the Western Cape through the Gama Park Mountains near Cape Town, forcing evacuations. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Traub's Bakery has a history of staying on top of the latest trends. Now, the Philadelphia bakery in the eastern state of Pennsylvania is courting controversy with its Donald Trump Make America Great Again hat cake. The bakery's Facebook page is on fire. Some love the dessert. Others now say they have had their last cake from Traub's. The 4-inch vanilla cake is available in 4 colors, and they've been flying off the shelves. Traub's Bakery isn't sure how long they'll be offering the hats or how long the social media dust-up will continue. And that is what is trending today. Well, today we continue our Part 2 series about the National Museum of African American History and Culture. VOA was granted special access to the museum, which is hosting thousands of visitors from the U.S. and abroad since it opened last year. In Part 1, we looked at the struggle to end slavery in America. Now we look at the civil rights era. Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick takes us back in time.
The museum honors the trials and triumphs of Americans of African descent. These galleries are devoted to their contributions in music, entertainment, sports, politics, and literature. John Franklin, the museum's director of international programs, is our guide through the exhibits. He says the post-civil rights era saw black influence go mainstream in America.
You have your first big stars, Michael Jackson, Oprah Winfrey, the sports and music icons of the time, Jesse Jackson making his bid for president.
America is the way it is in part because of these extraordinary contributions to the cultural history of the United States. But these accomplishments were shaped by the ongoing struggle for equality, tolerance, and freedom. After slavery was abolished, new forms of oppression took root here. Decades of intimidation, lynchings, and racial segregation. Franklin says laws and customs were used to enforce the racial divide.
1869, this is after slavery now. Black children prohibited from attending Pittsburgh schools. So the laws are not just in the South, but in the North. here is Georgia, restaurants. All persons licensed to conduct a restaurant shall serve either white people exclusively or colored people exclusively and shall not sell to the two races within the same room or serve the two races anywhere under the same license.
An interactive exhibit highlights the courage of black college students who challenged these laws by daring to sit at whites-only lunch counters in Greensboro, North Carolina. The display inside the table asks visitors what they do at different chapters of the civil rights movement. Public transport was segregated too. Here, a railway car gives visitors the unsettling experience of stepping inside and into America's segregated past. The 1963 March on Washington, led by Martin Luther King Jr., is a key moment in the civil rights movement, leading to the repeal of segregation and enforcement of laws guaranteeing black Americans the right to vote. Franklin walks us through the era following King's death.
King has been assassinated. This is a march honoring him and commemorating him. This is his funeral. This is his picture of his widow, Coretta King, on the cover of Life magazine.
The struggle for black empowerment took on a new dimension with the Black Power movement, a call for African Americans to unite, recognize their identity, and determine their own future.
Black power takes many forms. The most notable form is in the political arena, African Americans being elected and have the opportunity to represent their constituents at many different levels, including in Congress. Black power is also economic power.
And that movement increasingly became part of a global push for black liberation, supporting South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle and calls for the release of Nelson Mandela from prison.
Across the nation, we demonstrated at South African embassies and South African consulates for his freedom. And I can remember the day we waited to see him released from prison and come here as a leader.
From Africa to the United States, the long walk to freedom and its many complexities is told here. For many, at home and abroad, the ascendancy of a black man to the pinnacle of American power is testament to centuries of sacrifice and achievement.
We will support democracy from Asia to Africa, from the Americas to the Middle East, because our interests and our conscience compel us to act on behalf of those who long for freedom.
This museum packs in more than 500 years of history. It all culminates here on the top floor with the story of Barack Obama's historic election as US president, his inauguration, and his time in office. The museum tour ends here, but the journey continues. As you can see, there is plenty of room for more history. Heidi Adams-Fitzpatrick, VOA News, Washington.
Thanks, that's our show. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Dogs are popular pets in the U.S. So, what could this expression mean? It sounds just terrible. Let's listen.
Dog eat dog. The media industry is so competitive.
I know, but these days, so many industries are. It's really just a dog-eat-dog world.
I want to work in a place that is the opposite of dog-eat-dog. You know, warm and fuzzy.
Me too. Maybe we could raise sheep and make wool sweaters.
Dog eat dog describes a situation where people will do anything to be successful. They do not care if they have to hurt other people in the process. The expression comes from the Latin saying, "A dog does not eat another dog." And that's English in a Minute.